Several seats in the state Senate are up for grabs this election year as longtime incumbents retire. 3 Democrats are looking to make the general election ballot in the District 6 race, which represents portions of South and West Maui. And on Oʻahu, the Democratic primary for the District 11 Mānoa Makiki Heights seat pits a newcomer against a veteran politician. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Ballots have already been mailed out across the state for the upcoming primary election. And tonight we're covering 2 races in the state Senate, including District 11 on Oʻahu. But we begin on the Valley Isle. District 6 covers a large portion of South and West Maui, including Makena, Wailea, Kihei, Lahaina, and Ka'anapali. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Tamara Goebbert was raised in Kihei and graduated from the University of Hawaii at Mānoa with degrees in journalism and political science. She's also worked as a legislative aide in the State House and interned in the Senate. Shaina Forsyth was born on Maui, grew up in Lahaina. She earned a degree in engineering geology from UCLA and has a master's degree in environmental science and management. She currently works in the hospitality industry. And Angus McKelvey was raised in West Maui. Since 2006, he served in the State House representing District 10. He has a political science degree from Whittier College and his Juris Doctor from Concord School of Law. I'm going to start with you, Angus, because the legislature is not getting very good marks recently. And as a legislator and as the older statesman of this group here, do you think that people really want new blood? Are you running into that a lot where they're saying, I'm tired of our legislators, I want something new?
I think they want us to actually make an impact on the problems that are plaguing both Maui and the state of Hawaii. It was sad to see what happened with those 2 legislators insofar as the bad apples. This year, we put together a commission to look at overall systemic changes, but I was chair of the Government Reform Committee, and we tried to do something immediately right now. The first thing we did was to ban all fundraising during sessions, and we also went ahead and put mandatory ethics training, repeated ethics training for all office holders, both in state government, legislative branch, and executive branch. And there have been some high-profile cases occurring on the executive side of things. So I think that's important. And the commission's coming out with a fleet of new recommendations, and I'm very supportive of, hopefully as a state senator, introducing those bills. But you're right, I think the frustration, we're seeing it everywhere, is like rents are skyrocketing. Affordable housing is becoming a fantasy, a dream. Inflation is basically scalping our working families, and people are frustrated, and they want to see results. We passed some good bills this year, but they're like, okay, when do we see the money? Let
me ask Shaina Forsyth, what are you hearing from voters in terms of their attitude toward the legislature now as you're running as a newcomer?
It's a great question, and that's actually part of the reason I am running, is that we've seen so many legislators in office for a long time. Some of the most important positions in government, president, governor, mayor, have term limits. Our legislature does not, and so you get people that have been in for many, many years. I think it's healthy to have turnover to keep corruption down and keep new people coming in with passion and motivation. I think we should have, new legislators every few terms at the least, and certainly every generation.
Are you hearing that from the people you talk to?
Yes.
Tamara, what about you? How do you feel about this? Do you feel like the legislature has gone far enough to police itself?
So I've heard a lot of people talk about how they are feeling neglected by their leaders. And yes, I have heard a lot of people talk about, yes, we want new blood, but they don't just want new blood, they want blood that is going to be passionate. People who are going to care about their community and the people that they're actually serving and not go into office with their own self-interests. Sorry, what was your second question? One more
No,
time,
I'm asking whether you felt like the legislature did enough, given that a Maui legislator was among those that was found guilty of literally taking cash from a bribe.
I think they could have done more. They could have done more in terms of just upholding their reliability and upholding their promise that they made to the people that they were going to serve them rightly and justly and not do anything on the side in that matter.
Angus, do you think something like term limits, it might be the time for something like that?
I think it might be the time, but I also think we need to look at term limits for the positions within the legislature, for chairs and leadership. You know, I mean, one old legislator told me turnover is good, change is good. Have different people having different ideas on whether it's tourism, human services, consumer protection, transportation. If you serve in these different areas during your tenure, you get a more well-rounded view and can put new ideas into government. I think when you see, unfortunately, people who have long tenures in these positions, very powerful ones, that's where you see kind of this, you know, silo effect take place, where you start to see these kinds of things occur that we unfortunately saw. And so turnover is good insofar as being able to, not only for the legislature, but for the positions within the legislature.
So like the fact that a committee chairman has so much power to kill a bill without anybody really asking why. Let me move over again to Shaina Forsyth. What are the issues that the voters are asking you most about in terms of those bread and butter, you know, issues that affect families?
In District 6 and probably across the state, I don't think it's any surprise it's housing. I have so many friends that can't find anywhere to rent, let alone buy. Buying seems out of reach, just a pipe dream for so many. So I think that needs to be the #1 focus right now.
What would you do about it?
We can use state and county lands. The cost of land is a big hurdle to developing housing, and so there are a lot of projects actually in progress right now in Maui, which I think is great. It will be important to keep that momentum going, but we can look at more lands as well.
You know, Tamara, you know, one of the things that happened recently was there was an affordable housing project in, I believe it was Kihei, that got rejected by the council. The developer got mad because, oh, now I'm free to go develop for sale housing to people from the mainland. Do you think that even though folks in Maui want more housing, does that NIMBY effect take effect? And how do you overcome that as a lawmaker?
Well, I think that we need to start looking at alternatives, or not even alternatives. We need to look at more solutions like community land trust models, like Nahaleo Maui. I mean, you know, for those who are not familiar with community land trust models, they are basically nonprofit organizations that retain pieces of land. And what they do is that they sell it and they rent it out to low-income families. And I think that that is something that we can look more into.
Sort of a nonprofit leasehold kind of arrangement?
Yes.
Let me ask Angus McKelvey, from your experience also at the legislature, you know, we've now got 3 Democratic governor candidates all saying that they'll proclaim some kind of an emergency over housing. What that usually means is that a lot of the permitting and land use requirements and the things that get public involvement in a project go away so they can have an emergency. Do you think that emergency like that would fly in the legislature, or I think there's too
I think there's some concerns with that, and to touch back on what Tamara was saying, this is the issue. You can have an emergency and build all of these units, but then they'll all get flipped into market price homes and all get speculated on. You need to ensure that they're going to be affordable in perpetuity. The 2016 study done on Maui saying we need 10,000 more units. In the old world, yes, more inventory means lower prices, but when you have people all over the world in the mainland calling up and paying cash for these homes, you're simply going to get snatched up. We have a process called 201H, a fast track process, and I remember years they would come in front of the council and the projects would get approved, and to this day, all of these units, which the affordable portions are now all market priced units. We need the Nahaleo Maui land trust restrictive covenants and maybe amending 201H is critical. We got to keep affordable in the affordable corridor. So
let me move on now. I got a question from Ellie by email. What highway issue in West Maui is your top priority? Let me go to you first, Tamara. We were talking about a big roundabout that's being built. You folks have lots of, actually Maui has a significant amount of traffic, but you also have highways that are threatened by sea level rise.
Yeah,
what is the big
erosion.
transportation issue in West Maui right now?
So, like you said, a big issue right now is not only just on Maui, it's sea level rise and coastal erosion. And so we are talking about, I mean, one of the big things is funding for the continuation of, Angus, what is that? Not Honua Pi'ilani, but
Lahaina Bypass North.
Lahaina Bypass. So the funding for that was coming from the rental cars. And once COVID hit, since nobody was able to come, we were not able to get that income to fund this this bypass to carry on further. And so that is one of the main highway projects, is trying to move our traffic inward. However, with this, I would love to touch up on the fact that even though we are moving away or planning to move away from the coastal lines, we do also need to remember and work on the actual reason why we are. And that is because of environmental factors. And so we need to do our part. While we're working on our plan B, we need to do our part to ensure that we won't need to continue to move inward.
Let me follow up on that. I mean, to Shaina Forsyth, do a lot of Maui properties need to start moving inland to get away from some of this?
They
I know
may.
that there's condos now that are totally hardening the shoreline with permission.
Right.
So, I mean, what do you think needs to happen? Do we need to let Maui be Maui, or what do you think about that?
We certainly should not be building any more right on the shore, and it's very important to prioritize the realignment of Honoapi'ilani Highway. Just last week, there was a huge swell, as we all know, and our highway was literally underwater with the waves coming over. So I think that needs to be probably the #1 priority right now in Maui as far as infrastructure and transportation.
Is that your feeling too, Angus?
Yes, we got RISE grants from the feds for design and planning to move the highway inland. We need to pull down these federal infrastructure funds immediately for the construction portion, and also utilize the cane haul roads so as we move it inland, we can actually get people back and forth. To the point made earlier of the bypass going north, we got scotched because of COVID, but I think if we switch the method of funding next session, we can get that back on again, particularly since the EIS has to be updated anyway, so it'll be finished by the time we go into the next session. But those concurrently are the biggest project for the West Maui area, and they're both needed like yesterday. But they're critical because we only have one road in and out, and all it takes, as Shaina said, is a little high surf or tree trimming the other day to simply create absolute Carmageddon.
How long has that been going on? I mean, this discussion, it seems like, I mean, it's been a while since I've been on Maui, but I remember that road at Ma'alaia being wet when I was there. I mean, how long, Tamara? I mean, since you were in high school or before that?
Before that, way before that. Oh my gosh, people have been talking about this for years, all right? And sure, there have been planning processes, and they're having their meetings, their discussions about what might be better for our community. But has anybody done anything about it? No, not really. And yes, also, infrastructure like roads and stuff, we need to work closely with the Maui County, because that is a county that is within county jurisdiction. But
you get a lot of questions, Shaina, about schools and stuff on Maui. I mean, I know we went through the whole COVID pandemic, and there was a lot of learning loss. There's some rural schools on Maui too, and is that a big issue too? What are you going to do about the schools, and how do you feel about it?
It is. A lot of my friends and people that I grew up with are having children right now. They have young children that suffered a lot of learning loss during the pandemic, and so people are very eager for this new school year, for kids to be in classrooms. Masking is a touchy subject, but I think most people are ready to take the masks off and, let that be up to the parents and the children to decide if they want their child to wear a mask. And we just need to get back to learning for our children.
Angus McKelvey, what kind of resources are needed? Do you feel like DOE is responding to what the needs are in Maui schools?
They are yes and no. I mean, one of the good things we did is finally give the teachers long overdue pay raises and step compression increases so we can retain teachers. Came out in the news yesterday that teachers are now going to unretire and not leave, so that's a huge win. But we need to do more for the kids to actually prepare them to have the skill sets for high quality jobs for a diversified economy. One of the things I'm a big fan of, and I know the superintendents touch upon it, is vocational academies, trying to get the schools to basically work with businesses to have real life training and involvement and get college credits early in the high school system so that when kids come out, they're ready to compete and companies see, hey, we've got a talented workforce here in Maui that we can draw upon and we can do business here.
Can I just add to
No, you
that
can say,
just
yeah.
real quick? So yes, we do need to work more with our children, and that's great. That's great that teachers are unretiring. However, I have a lot of teacher friends, and I know a lot of people that are in the education industry, and they have voiced to me that they do not feel like their needs are being met by the DOE. So I think that we need to start taking care of our teachers and the faculty members, the people that are actually there spending hours on end with their children before, yes, our children are important, but we also need to take a look at our teachers.
One of the big picture issues that's been around forever is whether DOE should be broken up by counties and whether each county should be responsible for its own schools. How do you feel about that?
That is something that I have thought about. I do not have a direct answer right now, but I do think that that might be better because each county has different needs. They have different schools and different students and communities. So I think that it might be better.
Let me move on to another question. So tourism on Maui, obviously, over-tourism in particular, really became a major issue during this pandemic. And again, now you look at the governor's race, there's all these suggestions about what we do. One of them is to have a green fee, although Josh Green doesn't like calling it that for some reason, and other fees and tax. What do you think, Angus, what do you think is the best way to control tourism in the county of Maui?
Well, I mean, there is some merit to the idea of having the fees for visitors who come here, as long as we can ensure that they go back to the islands and generate the impact. We need to expand the reservation systems that DLNR put into place for popular attractions, and also to expand and preserve public parking and resources for our local people. I think the main thrust for me, and the bill is going to try to start to do this for next year, is like they did in Iceland and the Columbia River Gorge, is we need to stress quality tourism, and we need to make sure that the money for tourism doesn't go into advertising. Everybody knows where Maui is. Everybody knows about Maui. We need to invest into cultural programs, cultural resources, natural resources, and educate the tourists that are coming, the visitors, that this is worth being involved in and this is the quality that we're trying to preserve and protect. But I like these ideas, but there are some constitutional issues that have been raised about the green fee program, and I don't want to punish local residents who go to the mainland for business or kids going to college. So I think if we do this, we need to make sure that it does only apply to visitors and not to our own local population.
Shaina, Forsyth, you work in the visitor industry despite having a couple of tech degrees. What's your perspective on it?
It's certainly reached a threshold. Even from the time I was a child in Maui to now, it feels like Maui's bursting at the seams. This morning, trying to get here from Maui, the wait at the airport was hours long, and you go on the roads, like Angus said, there's one road in and out of West Maui and it's congested. So I think we could look at tourism thresholds. Each county can do a study on what that maximum level can be for them. I think it's important to look at that so we can have quality tourism over quantity. We also need to better enforce illegal rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs that are everywhere, also taking up valuable housing inventory that our locals could be living in. So I think we really need to enforce that much better, and no more hotels. We have enough.
Tamara, your thoughts about over-tourism?
So actually, I want to touch upon a little bit about what you said about the illegal Airbnbs and things like that. So, I mean, we're all familiar with the fact that people out of state are buying our homes and then renting it out for way above market price, or even, And so my idea for that would be to tax these people extra if they are not renting at an affordable rate to our local families. And in terms of over-tourism, I'm on board. I mean, we have implemented a reservation system, especially on Haleakala and getting into state parks and things like that. My one question about a threshold is, how are we going to monitor that? Is someone going to try to book a flight and then it's going to go, whoops, can't do that. You can't, So it's like there's so many things that we can do about this, but it's really about breaking down the process. on how we can actually accomplish these things. And I think it needs to be discussed further, not just between legislators, but with the community in general, and see how they feel about it.
Angus McKelvey, what do you think is a realistic tactic?
Well, no, she's right. I mean, it's a multi-pronged thing, and the county government, for the case of Airbnbs and TVRs, they're the entities that regulate and have oversight insofar what's permissible and not. Some things like a carrying capacity, you know, it'll be very challenging to enforce it because you can book a ticket and come to Maui. Right. There's nothing stopping it. However, we can look at things like a TAT rate. We can look at things like expanding the reservation system, things like this to try to hold the numbers down. The rental car tax I talked about earlier that we passed to fund the bypass was kind of along those lines. You increase the rental car tax for the visitors, they're more inclined to not rent rental cars or 2 or 3 for a family, and the impact they're having is going to fund a much needed highway corridor that will take their traffic out of Lahaina town, which is causing a huge impact on this place called Keawe Street right now.
How big an increase in the rental fee was there?
We basically raised it to about $7 a car, and with the bill basically said that fee had to be spent only on the extension of the Lahaina bypass.
Why would that be so restrictive? Why
because the DOT will take it and pull it up and put it in Oʻahu or put it over here or put it over there.
No,
that's
but restrictive,
why.
Like, why not make it 20 or 30 bucks and then make plenty of money? Let me ask you that, Shaina. Why not just zap them?
We could. I'm sure a lot of study went into deciphering that $7, amount.
You're so nice.
So I don't know if I'll question the past decisions, but I would certainly be interested in putting a lot of thought into future decisions.
What kind of fees do you see, Tamara, that you could use on tourists? I mean, you mentioned higher taxes on the rentals,
Yeah.
but what about other things? Do you think that pricing tourists out, some level of tourists out, will work, or do you think the money will still come in, the tourists will still come?
This is actually something. So earlier, when we were talking about the bypass being built and how we were relying on these fees coming from rental cars, I was thinking to myself, okay, but come on, COVID happened, and then we had to stop. That didn't work out. So what other opportunities are there for us to be able to continue to fund this? I mean, besides state and federal funding, sure, but we don't want to tax our communities more. Our people are suffering enough. So we need to think of more ways. I'm still trying to think of other ways that we can tax people without it being a burden,
Angus,
You can only fund highways through gas taxes and through other kinds of fees like this. The idea was to make sure our residents don't pay for the majority of the highway, to have the visitors do it. COVID was unseen, however, by switching the funding from a revenue bond into a reimbursable bond. We can get the bonds floated immediately to build the highway, and then as future rental car tax comes in, it would pay back the bond money. But COVID was unexpected. Nobody woke up and said, gee, there's going to be a worldwide pandemic. And the other thing, too, is that while we need to offset the impact of the visitors, we need to be realistic in the fact that they're the major industry. They provide a number of jobs for our working families. So the idea is, how do we manage tourism? How do we create quality tourism so that we still have this, as we try to diversify our economy?
healthy
That was exactly
healthy
the
tourism.
question I was going to pop on Shaina Forsyth, because as a person with a tech degree who came to Maui and is working in the hospitality industry, where do you see, particularly for Maui, opportunities to actually diversify? I mean, yeah, there's agriculture, but what else could there be on Maui? What else would you look for?
Well, I was going to say agriculture, but in addition to agriculture, I think it's great that we have a college on Maui, an extension of UH, and there's a lot of new areas in the college, including entertainment and tech, and we saw so many people with tech backgrounds move to Maui during the pandemic and work remotely. With the advancement of remote work, I think there's a lot more opportunity to have tech industry, possibly some entertainment, and agriculture. I think that's very important.
How do you attract those industries, though, do you think? Do you give tax breaks to people to come and set up a business, or what would you think?
I think it starts with education. So I'm really happy to see that we're delving into these areas in our Maui College, and we're seeing a lot of students graduate in technology and industry, and entertainment.
Tamara, what do you think? What do you think the opportunities are for diversity?
Well, I mean, we're already encouraging STEM industries, but I mean, in Kihei, there's that science and research technology.
Accelerator?
Maui Tech
It's-
Park.
Maui
yeah,
Tech
the
Park.
Maui Tech Park, and they work with, for instance, I know someone that works up there, and so they work with tracking missiles, and they work with, sometimes they'll go up to Haleakala, and they work closely in so what I'm trying to get at is maybe kind of push people, our kids, to at least pursue their interest here. A lot of people are leaving because they either don't see a future here because they are not aware of the opportunities that are available, or they just don't think it's affordable. So I'm thinking maybe more STEM. There is this, I think that Tech Park's amazing, but yeah.
What do you think, Angus, in terms of finding ways to get jobs there that people with tech degrees or whatever can use? I mean, is there anywhere near enough?
I think it can be done, but some of these traditional tech credit programs that we've done in the past, I mean, part of being I think a good public servant is to evolve, and some of these big tech programs that we've done aren't working. And for instance, the model that they rely on is companies get seed funding, angel funding, they grow and develop, but then they have to move to the mainland. And that to me is where the rub is. We need to restructure any tax credit programs so that they go into companies that make the commitment to stay here. Maui Tech Park's a good example. I went up there just the other day because the Kihei Charter School there, a lot of those spaces are empty. Those companies have moved out. And so we need to structure our credit programs that we do have for high tech to make sure that they go into things like the tech park. You have to be at the tech park. You have to hire local and stay. And you have the tie into education. And that's where I think the opportunity for the Kihei High School as well as Lahaina Luna is insofar as developing future tech hubs or other innovation hubs near the school.
Shaina, the folks that you went to school with and graduated, what would it take to attract them to Hawaii?
You mean
Your college guys?
my college friends? Good paying jobs, that's what it would take. A lot of people do envy the lifestyle though. I know there's a draw to live in Hawaii certainly, but you need the paycheck to be able to live here.
That's certainly true. And just a reminder to our viewers, one, I did get advised by a caller that the reason they denied that affordable housing project was because it floods. I know that that's something of a dispute. But also want to remind our viewers that whoever wins this primary election, the Democratic side, will face opposition in the general election. We want to thank our guests, the Democratic candidates for State Senate District 6, Angus McKelvey and Tamara Goebbert.
Go, Bert, woo.
And Shaina Forsyth. We'll be back with the second race of the evening after this Hikino story from students at McKinley High School.
Oh, look, we have shrimp. See them?
At Hawaii Nature Center, our mission is to connect children and families to nature. We want to create the next generation of environmental stewards who can care for this unique place that we all call home.
Located in the heart of Makiki Valley on the island of Oʻahu lies the Hawaii Nature Center, where young minds can get a real feel for environmental education.
There's something that you can't ever replace sitting in a classroom with feeling wind on your skin or seeing a shrimp in the stream or hearing the birds in the forest. When groups come to our programs, it enhances what they're learning in the classroom because science is all around us. It's a dream job in that sense, and bringing together my two passions, which would be environmental education, environmental stewardship, and culture. And so I find it really wonderful that I get to do what I love every day. To share that with the next generation is pretty wonderful. Our world is in big trouble. There's big changes happening, and we can ignore it on a day-to-day level to some extent, but what's happening, we're noticing more and more. And so for us to be able to share that with kids, to reach kids, is very valuable.
Kids at the start of the week may be littering at school, or their parents may be using a lot of disposable plastics at home. And by the end of the week, these kids are bringing zero waste lunches where they are able to compost everything that they don't use. And their kids are taking green bags to the store.
A big part of it is modeling by example. Kind of draw them in that direct one-on-one context, pull them in, get them excited about it, show them that you're excited about it.
We want them to feel empowered and inspired that they're able to make a difference in changing the community and taking care of this planet.
The Hawaii Nature Center believes that Through education, individual impacts can make a sustainable future possible, powered by today's youth.
The best way to save the planet, I think, is to first experience it and learn about it and care about it. That will then lead to stewardship down the road by having those fundamental connections with the environment, and that's what our mission is at the Nature Center.
This is Kara Rossavon from President William McKinley High School for Hiki No.
Apples with a crunch.
Welcome back. Now to the Democratic candidates for State Senate District 11, which includes Mānoa, Punch Bowl, Papakolea, and a portion of Makiki on Oʻahu. Ian Ross was born on Oʻahu and grew up on Kauai. He is the chair of the Makiki Lower Punch Bowl Tantalus Neighborhood Board and is a graduate of the University of Hawaii at Mānoa. Carol Fukunaga is currently on the Honolulu City Council. She's previously been elected to both the State House and State Senate. She's a graduate of UH Mānoa and the William S. Richardson School of Law. Let me start off with Ian Ross. As a newcomer to office, going for a State Senate seat, that's pretty ambitious. What are you hearing from viewers or voters about the legislature? Do you feel like voters are anxious to have new people as opposed to veterans?
What I hear over and over again, especially at the over 6,000 doors that I've knocked on during this campaign, is that the divide between community and government is wider than ever. And as someone who serves as a neighborhood board chair and has worked as an aide in the state Senate, I don't think this is just the belief of voters. I think it's fact. I think a lot of people just don't feel heard. People don't feel invited to be heard. And I definitely hear a need for new voices and new legislators to serve.
Carol Fukunaga, you typify a veteran lawmaker. Do you find yourself on the defensive with people who are unhappy with the legislature, the council, or elected politicians in general?
Not really, because, at the City Council, I have certainly learned that whenever people are unhappy with what is happening either at the state level or at the city level, we receive all the complaints. And so I think at the city, we are actually the closest to the communities, because typically, say in Makiki, Punch Bowl, and a lot of these other areas, we get complaints about city services, state service, the whole 9 yards. And so we oftentimes take it upon ourselves to work directly with individual groups and community organizations. So I sort of feel like we're always in motion. In fact, Ian and I were both at Punch Bowl National Cemetery today to address some concerns that have been raised among residents and people who live in that Punch Bowl area. And so we came away from that discussion both having had a good discussion with the administrators, as well as also giving people from the neighborhood a sense of how they could work more directly with the leadership at the cemetery. So it was actually a very productive session, but it's one of hundreds of different kinds of instances like that.
Ian, what are the issues that are coming to you most often from voters about these issues that you feel have been not addressed?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that surprised me while running for office as a first-time candidate is how consistent the top 3 issues have been. Number 1 is commonly homelessness. Number 2, housing. And 3, crime and community safety overall. This is something which I've also talked to other candidates about, and it's very surprising to see people across all the political divides and political parties have pretty widespread agreement that there's a failure in terms of being able to adequately address these issues.
So what do you do about it? Let's start with the first one, the homelessness. I mean, your folks' district is particularly vulnerable because you push them out of Waikiki and they come up to Makiki. You push them out of Chinatown and they come over to Makiki. I mean, what can you do about that as a state legislator?
Fantastic question. Well, first, absolutely. Failed programs and sweeps have continuously pushed people from community to community, and right now Makiki and Mānoa are really receiving the brunt of a lot of this. As someone who used to serve on the board for RISE, a homeless shelter 501c3 run on the windward side, I was going through the types of issues that are encountered when you want to let people stay in a shelter. Up until last year, homeless unaccompanied minors were essentially banned from staying at almost any shelter in the state. They'd be kicked out at 8 p.m. I actually went to Senator Chang and Representative Adrienne Tam, and we got a bill passed last year, HB 282, which finally removed that ban. And I think that's the level of attention to detail that I want to bring to the state Senate. There's a lot of.
I apologize for interrupting you, but I mean, the larger problem of homelessness, particularly the folks that are in your district, isn't minors so much.
Sure.
It's much older people, many of them longtime addicts to drug addicts or mentally ill.
That's absolutely true. Well, I bring this up because I don't believe there's a silver bullet. I think you have to go line by line, detail by detail, group by group, and make sure you do add that help. One of the things I was surprised about when I advocated for this was none of the state legislators I spoke to understood and knew this problem existed. And there's a lot of problems like that. One area that I want to try to work on directly is making sure our Medicaid dollars go to a better use. 3.6% of Medicaid users are experiencing homelessness, and they spend up to, there's projections as high as 61%. And I think there's just much better uses for that funding, and I want to front load it into mental health services.
Let me ask Carol Fukunaga, as a council member for the last 8 years? 10 years, okay, because you had 2 years at the front end. You know, you folks have been dealing with homelessness all over the island. What lessons have you learned that you could take to the legislature that you think will finally work? Because the perception of the community out there is homelessness is getting worse, and they wonder when the legislators are going to figure this out.
Actually, you know, I think we have done a lot to demonstrate that you really have to have solutions that are community-based. For example, on the windward side, you know, there's a very innovative program that has been put together by one of the farm communities out in Waimanalo, where they've done little pallet shelters, you know, and she has invited people who are homeless on the beach to come and live in those shelters. They're actually mini homes. They're tiny structures, but we worked together with the group that brought those pallet shelters in, and along with Lieutenant Governor Green, who has advanced the Kauhali concept. If you use specific solutions in different communities, that's, to me, the thing that makes the biggest difference. I'll give you an example in Chinatown. Downtown and Chinatown and Iwalei are the areas that we concentrated a lot of resources in during the last 10 years. So we organized the Punawai Rest Stop, which is a hygiene center on the ground floor. You have the H4 medical triage clinic on the second floor. You have a little bit of housing above that. The goal is really to match the kinds of services and programs that the people who are homeless in your community need. So
let me go give Ian one more chance on this issue. Is it, can you see someplace in Makiki where people would tolerate having a village of tiny homes?
Well, keep in mind we already have some transitional housing in Makiki. And actually, it's been a cause of some problems, and I think there's additional services that should be offered there. Tiny homes is a great start. I agree with the council member on that. But we should use Medicaid dollars to add wraparound services. Right now, a lot of our Medicaid dollars are going towards emergency room visits, which are some of the least effective and most expensive medical interventions. By using CMMI grants and CMS waivers, we can begin to front load those services at these facilities to make sure we're helping people with drug addiction, undiagnosed mental health disorders, and things like that.
For the last question, Carol, would you, I probably shouldn't use your first name, but anyway, we've known each other for a while, but for your district, though, specifically, what do you see the solution for homelessness?
I think for Makiki, Punchbowl, Tantalus, et cetera, we have been trying specific locations that we have been looking at. We have taken the state and the county folks, including the current administration, Mayor Blangiardi's team, to visit one particular structure that is available now. It just came on the market, which we think is going to be very similar to the Iwalei Punawai Rest Stop type of facility that can be repurposed for, you know, kind of a services and hygiene center type of facility. And then in the Makiki and Papakolea areas, we've been working closely with some of the community nonprofits in Papakolea to deliver services for those who are homeless who have Native Hawaiian
Sounds like
roots.
what both of you are saying, though, is that when it comes to homeless housing or transitional housing, you see using existing buildings as opposed to, you know, renovating an existing building as opposed to, say, a village of small houses, which might be more appropriate in Waimanalo.
I think for Honolulu, part of what we would be looking for is appropriate locations first, and then you want to get community buy-in. I think the good thing about Papakolea is that the community nonprofit has been working with DHHL to identify specific parcels within the Hawaiian homestead area where the houses have been vacant. And if you can have people live there, deliver services, and receive assistance, that makes it a lot more manageable rather than something large, and that is,
I understand.
You know.
Let me ask both of you now. You mentioned housing was the second biggest issue you're both hearing about. But in your folks' district, it's largely built out. There's not a lot of vacant properties. There's been a lot of people saying, well, let's improve the infrastructure and start going high-rise in these communities. Do you see an appetite for say in Makiki or Mo'iliili or even up into Mānoa for higher structures that would accommodate more people?
Well, I'm a supporter of the Aloha Homes proposal. I think building up is a better alternative to building out. We don't want to pave over every green inch of Hawaii. The Aloha Homes proposal would specifically build on state lands, which cuts down a lot of the costs related to acquiring lands in the first place. A study that wasn't even that favorable towards it still found a three-bedroom, two-bathroom, about 1,000 square feet, would be able to come out between $300,000 and $400,000 per unit.
Is it leasehold high-rise?
Yes, absolutely.
So, but I mean, do you see those high-rises? I mean, are there vacant state lands in your guys' district? I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, it's great to propose a big housing project for someone else's district, but are you guys willing to accept and support and push through a big housing project in your guys' district?
Makiki could play some role in it, but let's keep in mind why we're talking about downtown. We're talking because it has great amenities, it's close to transit lines, we have the state lands there. You know, we should build where it's the most affordable and positively impactful for the future of Hawaii.
About Carol, I mean, your district, you've been known for protecting your district from stuff like that. So let me just ask, I mean, would you be willing to have your district be part of the solution for housing when it means more density and more high-rises?
I think in most instances, if you look for community-based solutions, you do not have to build large structures, you know, within communities. I'll give you one example that we have right in Makiki now. This is the 1506 Pi'ikoi project that the city embarked on. They purchased the old Island Paradise educational facility, and that was kind of renovated into, you know, less than 50 units. But the amount of people that are assisted at that particular location has turned out to be fairly significant. We also have a project that is located right off Ward Avenue, and when you start adding a few here, a few there, there's one facility in Upper Makiki, you know, that serves homeless individuals who have had AIDS in the past. And I think it's these clusters of smaller scale projects where the operators are trusted and respected by the neighbors. Those will go a long way towards helping to house everyone, because you need to have a lot of small community projects throughout the community.
I think this is where we potentially have the largest disagreement. I believe we've built inadequate housing for local people for a long time now. We look at Kaka'ako as originally pitched as this workforce housing development. We see empty towers. We see out-of-state speculators. We see rising home prices. We've seen 6 straight years of population decline in Hawaii at the 3rd fastest rate in the country. We desperately need more housing for local people. And I think if we don't talk about some large proposals in addition to the small proposals that the council member mentioned, which I'm also a supporter of, we're never going to get to where we need to be. And we're going to lose more families and never be economically competitive.
Let me change subjects here based on a question from a viewer from Calvin. He asks, what are you most proud of in the last 5 years that you have done to help Kupuna? That just opens the door to, you have a large population of older people in your guys' district. People have been living there their entire lives. What are the biggest issues, Ian, for the older people in your district, and what do you see doing for them as a legislator?
Fantastic question. I used to be the public policy manager for the Alzheimer's Association Hawaii, and there I supported proposals that helped people age in place, supported caregivers. People want to be able to live at home with dignity. You know, you work your whole life in Hawaii, you retire, you want a chance to live in your home. One of the things that I support is very similar to the Washington CARES program, which has the public long-term care insurance program. There was a study done back in about 2008, 2009, showed it would be feasible here in Hawaii. We didn't implement it, and instead we saw Washington State implement it to great success. And I think we should bring that here so that everyone, if they need long-term care as they age, has access to that support.
Carol Fukunaga, is there any lack of that kind of service? Is that service really lacking here?
I think what we need to do is take a look at where we may have gaps. I know that in Mānoa in particular, you have a lot of elderly residents. And one of the things that we started looking at most recently is where we might be able to partner with city services. You know, we started up that core program that is supposed to assist homeless individuals, you know, and kind of reduce the number of emergency room visits. At the same time, that program is based on the original community paramedic model, which was intended to assist elderly as well as other people in the community in terms of either assisting them if they've tripped, they fall, kind of be sort of the neighborhood go-to type of entity. And I think the more that we can develop in community services, that's going to be a big starting point for us to help people stay in place longer. We have a number of businesses in Manoa that are also going to people's homes, working with seniors, even something as simple as, leaning against the wall and lifting your arms and, bending and squatting. They're finding that programs like that can help people stay safe and stay in their homes much longer than, would have been the case in the past.
Ian mentioned crime. What is the crime issue in your guys' area? What's the root of it?
I think the biggest problem areas that we've seen most recently is the growing number of property crime, break-ins, car thefts, et cetera, and instances where oftentimes the police are not able to come up with leads. And so that's where I've become a really strong proponent for increasing the number of neighborhood security watch programs, because we found that if neighbors are looking out for their neighbors, that helps the police. It also gives them access to a lot of information that they can share with other neighbors.
Ian, what was your response to the crime? What's your suggestion?
Well, we of course have a shortage of police officers currently. We have to fill in more of those positions. We should be working to recruit local folks for this. One thing that shows a really broad-based appeal and effectiveness is more foot patrols. But it's really hard to make those feasible when we have such a shortage. We also have an enormous backlog of evidence. I had my own car's catalytic converter stolen. My girlfriend's moped was vandalized. We have people's faces on the videotapes, and there's just no follow-up. Most tragically of all, 84% of rape kits between 2000 and 2016 went untested. There's an enormous backlog of evidence that could be gone through to identify people who are repeat offenders and violent offenders.
Would you support, for example, they just passed legislation recently to consolidate more of the state law enforcement people. Would you be supportive as a state legislator of a larger policing law enforcement entity within state government to sort of either backfill or support the local police department?
I think it's important to be open to shaking things up. I think this is an exciting possibility, and it can also, I think, allow for better cross-training across counties and making sure, taking larger accounting of where the deficits are. Like I was mentioning, the backlog of evidence is huge, and in talking with police officers, they often tell me, well, I can go out on the streets and do a patrol and try to keep people safe, or I can watch video camera footage for 8 hours. And they see that as the dichotomy. And as long as that's the case, we're not going to be doing enough to catch violent offenders who have left evidence behind.
Anything else on crime, or can we move on?
We can move on.
So, there was a huge scandal in the legislature. I know that you are familiar with these members who were caught literally taking cash from folks, in bribes. We also have a campaign spending system right now that is under fire from so many angles, so many opportunities for special interest. Do you feel the legislature went far enough after its members were caught red-handed taking bribes to prevent corruption like that? And do you think there's something that could further change to help prevent corruption from invading our legislative process?
Well, I think there's several approaches that can be considered, and I think the House did a good job of establishing a commission to review some of the changes that should be made. And I think it makes sense to have an independent body make recommendations, come up with legislation, and actually implement some of those changes. I think the thing that I've also learned on the City Council end is we have much stricter reporting requirements, and maybe that's something that could be translated or transferred also into the legislative process. In the City Council, because we serve both an adjudicatory as well as a legislative function, we file written disclosures anytime a member has a financial interest in a particular piece of legislation or a zoning decision. And I think those kinds of actions, as far as increased transparency and accountability, are an important step. the council also requires all members to not monitor, but to file their expense reports. So everything that you spend, out of your legislative funds for whether it's paper and flyers for a town meeting, et cetera, all of those are also accounted for.
Let me give Ian a chance. Do you think they went far enough? And do you think they need really a third party to tell them what's wrong with their bodies?
I think the commission, when I looked at the individuals who appointed to it, that gave me a lot of hope. But absolutely, the legislature did not go far enough this year. As a neighborhood board chair, and our neighborhood board system is often held to a higher ethical standard with longer reporting deadlines to give the public notice and things like that than our legislature. And I simply don't think that makes a lot of sense. One issue, of course, is that chairs have a lot of power. And so we know that they're more susceptible to being able to be influenced by either the backroom dealings that we'd seen recently, but also through legitimate donations. And I think that's one of the larger issues. We do have this kind of disgusting culture of campaign finance in Hawaii that really makes people doubt the effectiveness of government. And so one, I really think we should be limiting the capacity of lobbyists to be able to donate to chairs and vice chairs during the legislative session. I think that's at least the ones they lobby directly. And I also am really proud to be one of the people who have signed the Our Hawaii Pledge to not accept corporate donations. And I think that's a really important step forward to begin to limit the role of that in politics.
Let me ask this, you're trying to become a freshman legislator. Would you support a term limit on that seat? Because Angus McKelvey, one thing he mentions, he's not for term limits, but he says maybe you should limit how long someone could be the chairman or chairwoman of a committee. But do you favor term limits on legislators similar to what they have at the city council?
I think a level of term limits make a lot of sense, and this is how I come from it. There's been a lot of studies now that certain legislatures have implemented term limits, and they don't find that those effectively improve the quality of legislation. But I think there is importance for the upper bounds, people who serve like decades in specific roles, where you want to be added a new fresh face, you don't want people to be able to consolidate power for that long. Certainly something that's really limiting of just like a 4-year term limit that I've heard some people propose before. I don't think that makes sense. It takes time for people to get to know the building. But I do think avoiding that consolidation of power makes a lot of sense and would be in the public interest.
Carol Fukunaga, as a longtime legislator, how do you feel about term limits? I mean, you just got termed out of the council. You seem to have enjoyed it there. But then now you're going back into office again.
Well, I think I would not necessarily favor term limits, because the distinction I would draw for the executive branch, the governor, lieutenant governor, mayor, et cetera, is those are executive functions. You are in charge of a whole branch of government. Legislative actions are more policy frameworks. You provide the policy that shapes how executive action occurs. I do think it's worth considering, the ideas about how long a committee chair should be in one place. But I think it's important to develop experience and expertise, within the legislative process. What I would throw out as a way of encouraging, greater competition for new ideas, et cetera, is considering whether or not we have been well served by the single-member district type of approach as compared with the multi-member district approach, which actually served Hawaii fairly well up through the 1980s, when I believe the Republican Party had sued to eliminate multi-member districts. And what we found was when you lost a lot of Republicans, you also lost a lot of the diversity and the collaboration.
So you actually do feel a stronger two-party system would be a healthier kind of system?
Well, I think if you had multi-member districts, I think many communities would like to have someone that they considered sort of a fiscal conservative, say a Wadsworth Yee, like we had in Mānoa. And then you would want to have someone who was a very liberal progressive, like Governor Neil Abercrombie.
Well, if by progressive you mean somebody who wants to adequately fund our schools, address campaign finance reform, ensure that kapuna and caregivers are supported, if that's the definition of progressive, then I'd be proud to be called a progressive.
I don't think anybody said it was bad to be a progressive, not in this room. But anyway, how do you feel about the idea that maybe having a two-party system in the state would be an improvement, a healthy two-party system?
Well, I certainly think more ideas are better. And our entire system is set up to have a primary and then a general, and we're not incredibly well served when we don't have that sort of battling of ideas. But there's a reason why the Republican Party has not been doing particularly well in Hawaii. And it's not because the Democrats are doing the most fantastic job ever. It's because they're straddled, of course, with a national brand that's increasingly toxic here in Hawaii. So they have to try to appeal to that. And then they also have to try to talk to the voters here. And that's increasingly a difficult thing to straddle. And I actually feel sympathy for how difficult of a situation that places them in. I'd love to be able to talk out ideas, some of the progressive ideas we were just talking about, with a fiscal conservative and find out where the voters stand on that. But that's not currently what our system facilitates.
Carol Fukunaga, I'll let you have the last word. What do you think is the 100% biggest change voters want?
I think voters really would like to be able to trust their legislators, and I thought that one of our former colleagues, Demby Forsyth, did an excellent job of talking about how things have changed. She said, there used to be not so much town hall meetings, but it was more like the stew and rice, gatherings where you actually had a chance to meet with legislators, just talk story, visit, have a meal. And I think that's sort of the thing that I would like to see, a return to, not so much only on issues.
I've got your point. Got to stop.
Okay. Okay.
Mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight. And we thank our guests, the Democratic candidates for District 11 Senate seat, Carol Fukunaga and Ian Ross. Next week on Insights, we're focusing on the Valley Isle in what's shaping up to be a very competitive race for Maui County Mayor. We'll hear from the incumbent as well as several challengers who are prominent county leaders. Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.